Hello, hello. This is the second week in a row where the episode is from the AuDHD Flourishing podcast, and I'm putting it over here on the longer road because it's relevant. It's a topic that I talk about, which in this case is Autistic Pride Day was June 18th, and I recorded an episode just about my own thoughts about what I'm proud of, and got some really lovely responses from that, so I did want to post it over here. And then I just wanted to briefly update you that I am still planning on continuing posting on the longer road every Friday, but there may be more of these cross-post episodes. Just, there's so much time I have in the week, and I am hoping to have a bit more time later this summer to really sit down and figure out exactly what I'm aiming to do with both podcasts, but people are listening, people are liking it, and so I do want to keep them both up if I can. And thank you so much, everyone who's reached out and given me your feedback and comments. I really, really appreciate it. And I really want to make sure that I'm taking both podcasts in a direction that centers you, the listener, and what you actually want and need. So again, if there's anything on your mind, I'm happy to hear from you. And I hope you have a great week. Hi, my name is Mattia Murray, and welcome to The Longer Road. You are on the longer road if you have multiple intersectional identities that are often marginalized. You've had to work harder to get to the starting line, and you might feel behind. I'm here to provide hope, support, and practical tips, and to let you know that you're not alone. Happy Autistic Pride Day, today, June 18th. I wanted to record a quick episode to talk about what I'm proud of and what I love about being autistic. So many of the conversations I'm engaged in around autism and ADHD are about ameliorating problems. And that totally makes sense because there are very real challenges. And certainly in the US where I live, there are very few ongoing supports for adults. And many of us are really struggling to survive capitalism. So acknowledging all of that without covering any of those very real struggles, I also want to be able to talk about the upsides and what I love about myself, what I love about my own experience. Because for me, those two things are very much co-occurring, right? There's the struggles and the difficulties of the day to day, and then there's also what I love about my brain and what I wouldn't give up. So that's part of what I'm trying to create here with AuDHD Flourishing is I'm hoping that with more of us talking about our experiences, the good and the bad, acceptance, more of us kind of being out as autistic in more spaces as it's safe to do so. I'm hoping that that will ultimately help build a more accepting world and a world that is more livable for neurodivergent people. That desire to build a more kind and just world is actually one of my absolute favorite things about my autistic brain. I don't know if you saw that study a while back. It was autistic. I can't remember if there was ethics or it wasn't just sense of justice. It was something around like making ethical decisions, even when you weren't being watched and even when it didn't necessarily make sense to do so. And that autistic people were doing this more and that they somehow managed to twist that into sounding like a bad thing, which, the autistic community obviously totally panned that study. And we're just like, what is this? But I'm proud of having a strong sense of ethics. And where I'm trying to find a balance there for myself is that I believe that there is no ethical consumption under capitalism. And that means there may not be ethical sales under capitalism. And as a self employed person who sells services, I'm pretty much constantly thinking about how I can do that as ethically as possible without just being a perfectionist and giving up completely, right? Like this is this big balance I'm trying to live myself is how do I live as ethically as I can while knowing that literally everything I consume is causing damage in some form. So that's just part of my own personal conundrum. Similarly, I love that my brain is naturally honest and that it's my instinct to be very forthright, very accurate. I care about accuracy. I love saying I don't know when I genuinely don't know rather than bullshitting an answer. I love giving honest answers to questions. And I especially love having those deep, honest conversations with other autistic people or just anyone who enjoys engaging in that way and who wants to find the truth alongside me. as much as that's possible. I'm not going to go all like philosophical on you right now, but please know that my brain is always doing that whenever I use a word like truth. A little track of my brain is now off, like questioning what that means. I'm proud of my ability to see and experience little details. I'm proud of my pattern recognition. I'm proud of how pattern recognition can make almost anything interesting to me. And I can always create something interesting in my brain out of my experiences. So if I'm genuinely bored and I want some stimulation, my brain can generate that internally through sensations, sounds, and ideas. And I think that's really cool. I'm proud of how the experience of being othered has always made me want to reach out and talk to people who look sad or like they need it. One of my first experiences of making friends with a stranger was when I was 7, I think, at this event, and I noticed that this boy looked overwhelmed and out of place, so I went over and asked if he wanted to do I can't remember if it was logic puzzles or crosswords or something, but I had something like that with me, and we just sat and did those together, and I remember somebody commenting on that at the time, that I don't know, that that was strange or remarkable that I had, like, drawn this kid out, and I was just like, "Well, I don't know, he looked sad and whatever." It didn't seem like a big deal. And when am in a group and I see someone, you know, noticeably out of place or having trouble in the space, even if it's just like a circle has formed and someone's standing kind of just outside it, I try to bring them in or at least acknowledge that I see them. And that's just, I think, something that my brain has learned to do because I've always felt like I was on the outside or like I didn't fit in very often. And while it can be challenging for me to function and communicate in large groups, I'm very proud of my exceptional ability to focus on someone one on one. When I'm in a direct conversation with someone, I have that presence and just genuine interest and curiosity. Like, I really want to know what's up with them. And it's not just that I don't enjoy small talk, although that is true. It's that I'm here for whatever weird stuff the person wants to tell me. I maybe don't want to trauma dump back and forth, although I have done that before. But, I remember a lot of details about people's preferences, and that makes me a really good partner and friend because, I can remember, for example, exactly how someone likes their tea or coffee and then make it like that for them every time. And that's a very loving act, I think. I do this with friends too, and I really notice and appreciate when neurodivergent friends do similar things for me. I'm proud of my ability to experience full body joy. This one brings up complicated feelings for me because, like a lot of AuDHD people, I have been mocked for my enthusiasm. But I feel like part of what I'm doing in my life right now, part of my I don't know, point in my healing journey is I am fully reclaiming my enthusiasm. So that includes stimming and screaming in delight. And what I'm thinking of as this sort of rewilding process of letting my body do the things that felt really good as a kid. And yeah, I'm doing that mostly in safe spaces so far, mostly at home. But it's really delightful to have neurodivergent friends in person who I can practice this with. And I'm honestly really proud that my brain can give me drug-like experiences without drugs. And just because I can experience pleasure so intensely. And actually, this is kind of a new theory I have. I mean, it may not be my idea. I just thought of it that I know autistic brains don't filter out negative or annoying stimuli in the same way that allistic brains do. And I'm wondering if we actually experience pleasure at more of a steady as well, because our brains aren't filtering out positive stimuli as well. I was thinking about this with food in particular, but I was kind of giggling when I was thinking about this episode because I remember one time hooking up with a friend not long after college, and he was like, "Wow, no wonder you like sex so much." So that's a whole other conversation because I do have sensory issues around sex that I'm like working with and figuring out. But the ability to just enter another plane of experience via pleasure is something I really love about my brain. And speaking of drugs, the one experience I've had with psychedelics was with one that was specifically supposed to enhance all of your senses. But my experience with it was that my senses were just exactly the same as before. And everyone else in the group that I was doing this with were having the experience of significantly heightened senses. And one of the takeaways for me from that was actually, wow, they're like holistic people have to receive a lot of help and support in order to just have my normal daily experience. And that was so validating because I'm kind of joking about like my brain being able to give me these intense sensory experiences that are drug like, but it's actually really cool that my brain has this intensity every day. And then I can take that and form it into art. And that's one of my favorite things about my brain. The other kind of related one that's mostly been annoying to me lately, but I suppose is cool, uh, is that if I like am present, just present in my space for even like 1 second, my brain just immediately starts writing poetry. It's like one of the tracks in my brain is just poetry. And the reason this is a little bit annoying right now is because I'm explicitly trying to focus on some other things and like write more music and stuff. And I'm not trying to write as much poetry, but it's like I can't turn that off. And it's a little bit like many years ago when I was learning composition, I felt like my brain just never stopped writing music, just constantly. And I mean, in my dreams, like it just did not stop for years and years. My brain was just like, this is what we do now. We write music all the time. And like, it's a little bit much. I could do with fewer ideas. But one of the things that I'm working with in my own life is how can I create some longer cycles where I have longer periods of time to work on one art form for a bit. Because right now, the back and forth lets me finish smaller projects. But if I wanted to, say, publish a book of poetry, that which I would like to, that's something that I need to give myself a longer chunk of time for. And that's another one, my basically constant stream of ideas. I know this is in part the ADHD as well, but that lovely AuDHD fire hose of ideas is definitely overwhelming sometimes, but overall pretty fun. And I was thinking about it the other day. I was like, if that just stopped, like if I just didn't have the ridiculous stream of ideas all the time, like what would I even do with myself at that point? Like, I'm so accustomed to that. I am definitely proud of my PDA profile, my persistent drive for autonomy. I'm proud of not really giving a shit about authority or hierarchy unless they prove that they're worth respecting. I think that that, again, kind of fits in with the drive for justice and wanting things to be fair and equitable and knowing that that is very much not the world we live in. And so a lot of my fire hose of ideas for myself, my creativity is around, what can we do to build better systems without just burning everything down and starting over? Because that always ends up disproportionately hurting the people who are already suffering in the current system. So I'm in this, I love the idea of starting over with new systems. And I want to like help or be a part of helping or, support people who are helping the people who are already getting screwed over the most by the system. And to me, that does come back to that PDA profile because I'm not just like, ooh, the system must exist for a reason. I'm like, no, I don't think so. I'm proud of my ability to consider deeply and make really good decisions. Not that I always do, not the decisions are always easy, but I do feel like I'm able to really think through. That's like definitely part of my autistic thinking is like, okay, let's consider every angle. I'm proud of my stubbornness. I think it's actually kept me out of some bad situations and kept in particular there is a certain, I mean, naivete is a word people will use for autistic people. I think of it as me being naturally trusting and like assuming that people are going to be as honest with me as I am with them. That is not the case. People do not do that. But I think my being really stubborn has actually kept me out of some situations in which people would have taken advantage of me or would have taken advantage of me more if I had continued to let them. And that's also as I've gotten more in touch with my body, I feel like My intuition has helped me with that, and having, my intuition speak up when it happens, when I experience an intuitive hit, I act on it. And that's that stubbornness and that willingness to go against authority. I don't care what anyone's telling me. If my body is telling me that this needs to happen or that this is a terrible idea, you can't make me. And I actually really like that stubbornness. One of my favorite words as a kid was obstreperous, which just basically means stubborn. I'm proud of my ability to dissociate because being in a body with so much sensory detail, plus the brain just going on like 4 to 16 tracks all of the time can be a lot, can be really overwhelming. I don't have the goal of being completely present all the time in my body. I know that that's like a goal a lot of people have for sort of spiritual reasons or trauma healing reasons. And I get it, but I don't know if my body can actually handle that. And by that, I mean, I love this idea that we are running advanced software on old hardware. That analogy just makes so much sense to me for how it feels to be in my own experience of my brain and body, just my brain and like my thoughts being so intense and so fast. Like I'm slowing myself down so I can communicate, but I used to sometimes speak as fast as I physically could, and it still wasn't, it's not the speed of my brain. And I could do that. I could just talk continuously at a just ridiculous speed for a long time, and I used to do that. Um, Gosh, I wonder how I got that incorrect bipolar diagnosis. But anyway, the dissociation thing, you know, I'm not saying you should dissociate. I'm just saying it has been really helpful for me to be able to just like check out. And especially in, I know not everyone would call this dissociation, but for me, being able to really go deep in an imaginary world. So reading a book, watching a show or movie, and just like even when I'm watching movies in other languages, even if I don't know the languages, it takes a while for my brain to come back to English after, even if it's a language I don't speak, because my brain is just like, we live in whatever country this is now. My brain's just like listening for that language. So stuff like that, where I feel like my brain can really put me deeply in an imaginary space, and that I think is kind of a superpower in some ways because it lets me get out of this sometimes. This is a really small one, but I'm proud of my conscientiousness and being able to do things without making a mess. Even as a little kid, I was often a really, really clean eater because I didn't want to experience the mess. And sometimes it slows me down. So this one's not necessarily, again, like huge, amazing, obvious one, but I enjoy being able to have what feels like a meditative experience while I'm doing tasks slowly, gently, quietly, neatly. It's very satisfying to my brain. I'm proud of my ability to synthesize information and be directly creative with synthesis. Most of my experience of my own creation is that I don't have genuinely new ideas, but that's okay. I think I'm more of a synthesizer and I take stuff around me and I combine it in interesting ways. And I actually like being able to look at my music or my writing and be able to see clearly the influences in my work. And that just feels a lot more honest to me than pretending that I completely made something up when I didn't. I'm proud of my ability to do a 40-hour work week in 5 to 10 hours a week when my brain really gets into gear. So, like, my brain can do some pretty cool stuff. I am proud of my ability to find the exact resource, piece of advice, or kind of direction to send a person when they have a complex problem that they feel like they can't search for online. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but this like unsearchable problem, right? Where you can't even formulate a question that like a search engine would kick something useful back to you. I love feeling like a human search engine for really specific complex problems, and in particular obviously working with neurodivergent people, being able to help them come up with what is the actual like tool or advice that you're looking for so that we can actually make sure it's really targeted and specific, and that isn't just replicating bad advice you've gotten before, because a lot of, as I mentioned in episode 1, a lot of advice doesn't work for us. And so I'm really interested in and like find it fun and challenging to be like, okay, you have these specific restrictions on your time, your space, what you've tried before that hasn't worked for you. We kind of like put all the pieces in place, and then I'm trying to like I'm the person that knows all this random stuff that I can like spit out system, or at least an idea, or like I said, a way to get started, or sort of a direction to go, even if I'm not actually implementing. I'm proud of how every time I learn something that helps me, I'm able to generalize the info to help others without just assuming that the exact same thing will help others in the exact same way, because we're all very different. And I feel like my brain can take apart the pieces of the tool or the modality or whatever that I learned and see how those pieces fit in. Very similar to what I was just saying, like finding a solution to a complex problem. But something I do see people do when they learn something new is just go, oh, this is the thing, right? Because it was their thing and it helped them. And that's great. But part of the reason I keep learning new things and modalities is not just for my own personal healing, although that's obviously how I got into it, but I feel like it's so much more interesting to me to be able to almost like take apart the whole Lego structure and, give someone just the right piece. It just so much more interesting to me. This is another one that's a little complex for me emotionally, but I'm proud of how deeply I care for people and how quickly I get attached to what relationship we do have. And I don't just mean romantically. I really have trouble telling how serious or deep a relationship is, because I will often feel that I'm closer to someone than they think we are, and sometimes vice versa. But I'm often the one that thinks we're closer than we are. So along with that, I'm proud of letting relationships take their natural shape and not trying to force them to be anything. Um, and really deeply caring about and living as a value consent, living consent as a value, because I like that I develop feelings and like closeness and depth in relationship very quickly. And I also never want anyone to feel pressured. So I'm proud of both of those things, even though, yeah, they can make relationships a little harder. I'm sure there are probably more things, but I did want to make this be a quick episode. And what are you proud of? What are you proud of as an autistic person, if you identify as such, or just a neurodivergent person? Because I feel like Autistic Pride Day is a great day for all neurodivergent people to really reflect on what you're proud of, what really feels good in your experience, what's actually enjoyable. If nobody else around you were, trying to make you stop or saying anything negative, if nobody was giving you a weird look, what would you do that just feels good? And I think that's a really lovely thing to start experience more of. I would love to hear from you. I already have a follow-up episode to make with questions from episode 1 that somebody gave me, and I really want this podcast to be that. I want to be sharing questions and reflecting on what people are giving back to me, because I feel like part of what's so interesting to me is how, while we have a lot of overlapping experiences, and that's super interesting, the really nitty-gritty details of the specific person's experience are so interesting to me, because while they're probably not the only person in the world having that, right? Like within the AuDHD community, they might be one of, let's say, 20 people with this really specific experience. And being able to hear those specifics is just so lovely, so interesting. Right now, for basically the rest of June, I am enrolling for the July to November cohort of my program, Love Your Brain, which we are working on simultaneously a big creative or business project. And then that brings up all your stuff. And then we look underneath that stuff and figure out what's going on for you. It is for AuDHD or just neurodivergent in general. You don't have to be autistic and ADHD. I just want to be clear that it is a great space for those folks, because there aren't that many spaces for us. Folks who are entrepreneurs and or creatives who want to build a life out of their true genius, but are still struggling with the day to day. And I made this program for folks who are I think of as mid-career, but I mean that in a very specific artist sense. So I just mean you're not just starting out, you're not looking for really, really basic, basic business tips, but you need to figure out, okay, how do I get my body and brain on board? Because that is what I struggled to find so much and had to sort of cobble together out of other programs that weren't really for neurodivergent people. And I spent way too much money on those because I wasn't finding things that were suited to my actual brain. And speaking of money, one of the things I really care about with this is that I have a couple of scholarship spots, one of which is spoken for. I could add a third one because it's only a cohort of about 10 to 12 people, probably. And we have 4 people so far, including one scholarship spot. So I do have scholarship. And while it's not on the sales page, I am like, I've had in mind sliding scale. I just didn't want it to make it complicated with the scholarships and the sliding scale. So basically, if you're looking at it and you're just like, "Oh my god, yes, this is perfect. This is exactly what I've been looking for," but the money doesn't make sense, reach out because I do have that scholarship spot, and then also I'm happy to do sliding scale. I am still figuring out in my own business, and this is something I'm, wanting to model and continue to work with. How do we create how do we get the work to the people who really need it? And I'm still figuring that out, but I'm really excited for this next round. Very briefly, somebody who's finishing up right now, she finished her novel after working on it for 15 years. So she's very happy and working on getting an agent. And yay, I'm very excited. And I'm especially looking to build a really great cohort. So that's really what I'm thinking about is, who is going to come in and just be like add that really lovely, unique neurospice and creative spice to the mix. So I will put that link in the show notes. And if you have any interest in it, just reach out or do the application, whatever, because I'm also always looking for, what's the next thing that can really help people, because that's why I'm doing this. So if it's helpful, awesome. And I will talk to you soon. Thanks for listening. If you know someone who would be helped by this podcast, please share it with them. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and suggestions at mattia@mattiamurray.com. That's MATTIA at MATTIAMAUREE.com. Thank you.